The 90s psychological thriller had this habit of being genuinely compelling, while also involving production decisions that range from legally questionable to outright insane. Studios were pairing 15-year-olds with 30-year-old men, casting future murder suspects, and letting actors break bones mid-scene, and somehow these films still made serious money. Alicia Silverstone was 15 years old when she landed The Crush, playing a 14-year-old girl whose sexual fixation on a grown man drives the entire movie. And to avoid California child labor laws limiting her shooting hours, she took a high school proficiency test and became an emancipated minor. The movie follows magazine writer Nick Elliott renting a guest house where his landlord's daughter Adrian develops a crush that turns into calculated revenge when he rejects her, framing him for assault and systematically destroying his life. Writer-director Alan Shapiro based the script on his own 1982 experience with his landlord's daughter and used the real girl's actual name, Darian, for the character until her family filed a libel lawsuit 6 months after the 1993 release, arguing Shapiro portrayed her as a psychotic sexual predator and an act of malicious defamation. According to Variety and Superior Court dockets, the studio settled and had to change the name to Adrian in every version, which became a redubbing nightmare where actors returned to record the new name, and the audio still has a noticeable phasing glitch on modern Blu-ray releases because they sloppily edited the new name over the original. Silverstone was paired with 30-year-old Carrie Elwes for intimate scenes, and in reflections on her early career years later, she admitted after filming A Kiss, she genuinely believed they were in a relationship, going to Elwes' trailer to ask if it was okay they were now boyfriend and girlfriend. The film made $13.6 million against $6 million, launching Silverstone straight into Clueless and a multi-million-dollar Columbia deal, while Elwes has since expressed serious discomfort with how exploitative the whole thing was. David Lynch became obsessed with the O.J. Simpson murder trial and started thinking about how a person could commit a heinous crime and mentally compartmentalize it so effectively they could just keep living like nothing happened. Lost Highway follows jazz saxophonist Fred Madison in a cold Los Angeles marriage with his wife Renee, as anonymous VHS tapes showing footage of them sleeping start appearing at their door, and after a surreal encounter with a pale mystery man at a party, Fred discovers a final tape showing him murdering Renee, gets convicted and sent to death row, then literally transforms into young mechanic Pete Dayton in a recursive nightmare loop. Lynch and co-writer Barry Gifford built the entire psychological structure around this idea of remembering things my own way, visualizing the internal mechanism of a killer who recreates his own identity to escape the trauma of what he did. The casting of Robert Blake as the mystery man became one of Hollywood's most chilling coincidences when Blake was arrested and tried for murdering his real-life wife Bonnie Lee Backley, just 4 years after the film's release, mirroring the exact legal trajectory of O.J. Simpson, who inspired the movie in the first place. Blake devised the character's look himself by shaving his eyebrows and applying thick white grease paint, with crew members describing him as genuinely unsettling during production. And Lynch specifically wanted Blake for his shattered screen presence, without knowing he was casting someone who would soon be at the center of a decade-defining murder mystery. For the final face distortion scene, Lynch insisted on almost zero CGI and forced Bill Pullman to drive at high speeds while makeup assistant Chris Hansen sat hidden in the back seat, manually inflating and deflating air tubes connected to balloons glued under prosthetic skin on Pullman's face. Jodie Foster was originally set to star alongside Michael Douglas, with David Fincher wanting her to play Nicholas's daughter, but Douglas felt uncomfortable because he was only 18 years older than Foster and the father-daughter dynamic didn't work. The game follows Nicholas Van Orton, a cold, ultra-wealthy San Francisco investment banker whose meticulously ordered world unravels after his brother gives him a voucher for an experiential game that escalates from minor inconveniences into terrifying conspiracy as his accounts get drained and he's hunted by gunmen through the streets. Production attempted rewriting Foster's role as Douglas's sister, but Foster found this peculiar and dropped out, then filed a $54.5 million lawsuit against Polygram Filmed Entertainment, alleging they had a binding oral agreement for her to star. The legal battle fundamentally changed the film, leading to Sean Penn's casting as the brother, and shifting the entire emotional core from parental focus to sibling rivalry. During the sequence where Deborah Kara Unger and Douglas leap into a massive industrial dumpster to hide from operatives, the stunt went horribly wrong when Unger struck real debris and actually fractured a bone in her foot during landing. But fearing Fincher's reaction to a ruined take, she stayed in character and finished the scene in intense pain. For a psychological thriller that's basically two people running through dark hallways, the game had an astronomical $70 million budget, nearly equal to The Lost World Jurassic Park, released that same year, with the extreme cost coming from Fincher's obsession with shooting almost entirely on location in San Francisco and Mexico and shutting down entire city blocks for weeks. The vibrating head effect on the demons in Jacob's Ladder was achieved entirely in camera using a technique called undercranking, where director Adrian Lyne had actors shake their heads as fast as possible while the camera filmed at just 4 frames per second. Jacob's Ladder follows Vietnam veteran Jacob Singer living in Brooklyn, increasingly haunted by grotesque hallucinations and fragmented memories of a horrific night in the Mekong Delta, working as a postal worker, despite having a PhD, and suspecting he and his platoon were victims of a secret chemical experiment called the Ladder, designed to increase soldier aggression. When footage was played back at standard 24 frames per second, the movement became this blur of supernatural nauseating speed that looked physically impossible, with Lyne citing Francis Bacon's distorted paintings as visual inspiration to create a smear of humanity more disturbing than any monster mask. This practical approach caused genuine distress during test screenings where audience members reported feeling physically ill, leading Lyne to trim nearly 20 minutes of the most intense body horror sequences, including a scene where Jesse literally transforms into a creature with a tail while dancing at a party. The film ends with a title card stating the U.S. Army tested a drug called BZ on soldiers during Vietnam to induce heightened aggression, with screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin researching the Edgewood Arsenal experiments where the military actually did test potent hallucinogens on service members. The film's claim that BZ turned soldiers into homicidal maniacs who attacked their own units was a dramatic exaggeration that caused friction with the Department of Defense, with the production team admitting in a 1990 New York Times interview that while the drug existed and was tested, the killing frenzy depicted was completely fictionalized. The famous hobbling scene where Annie breaks Paul's ankles with a sledgehammer was the source of a massive behind-the-scenes battle between director Rob Reiner and legendary screenwriter William Goldman, with Stephen King's original novel featuring Annie chopping off Paul's foot with an axe and cauterizing the stump with a blowtorch. Misery follows famous romance novelist Paul Sheldon, who kills off his popular character Misery Chastain to pursue serious literature, crashes his car in a Colorado blizzard, and gets rescued by former nurse Annie Wilkes, whose devotion quickly reveals itself as violent psychotic obsession as she holds the badly injured Paul captive and forces him to burn his new manuscript and write a return novel, bringing her favorite character back to life. According to Goldman's memoir, Which Lie Did I Tell, and a 2025 TCM Classic Film Festival retrospective, Goldman was furious when Reiner changed the axe to sledgehammer, fearing it would make the scene too soft, but Reiner argued losing a foot would make Paul a victim, whereas the sledgehammer allowed him to remain a full person fighting for his life. The crunch of ankles was created by breaking frozen large breed dog biscuits wrapped in a towel, with James Caan reportedly looking at Reiner after seeing the final cut and saying something along the lines of, "You're absolutely demented," realizing the psychological impact was more cringe-inducing than gore. Before Caan and Kathy Bates were cast, the Paul Sheldon role was turned down by Jack Nicholson, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Harrison Ford, and Michael Douglas, because many actors felt playing a man bested by a woman who remains passive would damage their tough guy brands. Reiner and Goldman risked the entire $20 million budget on Bates, a virtually unknown stage actress, resulting in a $61 million box office haul and the only Academy Award ever won for a Stephen King adaptation. One of the most haunting sequences in European cinema involves Cesar wandering through a completely deserted Gran Via, Madrid's busiest, most iconic thoroughfare, in broad daylight, with production granted a mere 3-hour window on an August Sunday morning to clear the street. Open your eyes, follow Cesar, a wealthy, handsome Madrid playboy living a life of effortless vanity who meets Sofia at his birthday party and feels a connection that transcends his usual flings, but his jealous ex-lover Nuria lures him into her car and intentionally drives off a cliff in a murder-suicide attempt that kills her but leaves Cesar with a hideously disfigured face requiring a prosthetic mask. According to a 2017 El País retrospective and DVD commentary, police had to block every side street but couldn't stop residents from looking out windows, with every person on a balcony or stray car ruining the take, while director Alejandro Amenabar later revealed the silence was so eerie it unnerved lead actor Eduardo Noriega, who felt genuine existential dread running through the empty city center. To depict Cesar's facial disfigurement, Amenabar turned to Francis Bacon's distorted fleshy paintings, with the prosthetic mask designed to look like a melting smudge of humanity. And according to Variety, the original cut was so visceral it faced significant pushback from European censors after a dream sequence surgery scene where Cesar's new face is peeled back like fruit caused fainting during early festival screenings. The makeup took 5 hours to apply daily with Noriega, spending significant portions of the shoot blinded or breathing through small slits in a plastic mask, sensory deprivation that bled into his performance, making his character's outbursts of rage and confusion more authentic. Penelope Cruz was cast to play the exact same role in both the original Spanish film and its American remake Vanilla Sky, with the 1997 original produced for approximately $2.7 million, earning over 1.8 million admissions and 10 Goya Award nominations, while Cruz became one of the few actors to become a global superstar by essentially remaking her own breakthrough performance. Jennifer Jason Leigh spent time studying women with borderline personality disorder and mirrored Bridget Fonda's mannerisms even when cameras weren't rolling, taking her preparation to an obsessive level that started bleeding into real life. Single white female follows successful software designer Allie Jones, who kicks her fiancé out after discovering his infidelity and places a classified ad for a roommate, choosing shy mousy Hetty Carlson, whose behavior takes an increasingly dark possessive turn as she begins mimicking Allie's appearance with an identical red bob haircut and clothes, escalating into violent identity theft and murder. The most shocking moment of production involved the infamous stiletto murder scene, where director Barbette Schroeder insisted on high physical realism, with Leigh handling a real weighted high-heel shoe as a weapon during the struggle, and the production had to use a prosthetic eye rig for the victim that cost tens of thousands of dollars to ensure Leigh didn't accidentally blind the actor. The film's setting at the Ansonia on Manhattan's Upper West Side plagued production with technical difficulties while filming in basement and elevator shafts, with the original ending testing poorly with audiences who found it too depressing, forcing Columbia Pictures to invest several $million in a total reshoot of the finale, turning it into a high-octane final girl confrontation involving the basement incinerator. Despite the chaos, the film was a massive financial surprise, grossing $84.1 million against a $16 million budget and finishing in the top 10 video rentals of 1993. In later interviews, both actresses revealed they initially turned the film down, fearing the erotic thriller label would diminish their reputations as serious indie stars, with the career fallout significant as Fonda found herself repeatedly offered damsel-in-distress roles, leading to her early retirement from acting in 2002, while Leigh's career became defined by dark and disturbed roles for years. To portray Dr. Helen Hudson's paralyzing agoraphobia, Sigourney Weaver spent weeks consulting with top psychiatrists and interviewing actual agoraphobia patients to understand the physical manifestations of a panic attack. Copycat follows renowned criminal psychologist Dr. Helen Hudson, who becomes a prisoner of her own mind after a near-fatal attack, suffering from severe agoraphobia and living in a high-tech San Francisco apartment, communicating with the outside world only through her computer until her isolation is shattered when a new string of gruesome murders begins, each meticulously recreating crimes of history's most famous killers, like the Boston Strangler and Jeffrey Dahmer, with Helen realizing she's being hunted by a copycat, using her own books as a blueprint. According to a 1995 interview with The Morning Call and production retrospectives, Weaver learned that for many the fear is not just of open spaces, but of losing control in a place where escape is impossible, insisting on filming that emphasized her character's sensory overload with set lighting, adjusted to feel assaultive when doors opened. Harry Connick Jr. took a dark turn to play terrifying serial killer Daryl Lee Cullum, immersing himself in a psychopath's mindset by watching hundreds of hours of actual police interrogation footage and documentaries on Ted Bundy and Charles Manson, remaining in character on set with a disturbing vacant stare and slow southern drawl that unsettled cast and crew. The production was noted for hyper-realistic recreations of famous historical murders, with the FX team using actual crime scene photos from FBI archives to ensure copycat murders were indistinguishable from originals, causing several crew members to reportedly walk off set during the Hillside Strangler recreation. According to production lore, the film's climax in a public park involved a staged hanging that looked so real it prompted dozens of calls to San Francisco Police Department from concerned citizens who thought they were witnessing an actual crime. The film grossed $32 million domestically on a $20 million budget, with its high rentability on home video turning it into a cult classic for thriller fans. The most iconic moment in Malice is Alec Baldwin's God complex monologue during a legal deposition where he famously declares, "I am God," written by a young Aaron Sorkin who was brought in to polish the script. Malice follows mild-mannered college dean Andy Safian, living in a quiet New England town with his wife Tracy, when they rent a room to Dr. Jed Hill, a brilliant but arrogant trauma surgeon. And when Tracy suffers an ovarian torsion threatening her ability to have children, Jed performs emergency surgery, removing her ovaries, believing them both necrotic, resulting in Tracy suffering a miscarriage and permanent infertility that leads to a multi-million-dollar medical malpractice lawsuit against Jed, as Andy discovers the accident may be part of an elaborate insurance scam. According to a 2014 Hollywood Reporter interview, Sorkin wrote the speech to encapsulate the ultimate arrogance of the medical profession, with Baldwin's delivery so intense the crew reportedly fell silent during the first take, and director Harold Becker, stating the speech was not in the original draft, but added to give Jed Hill a mythic level of villainy. Nicole Kidman studied classic femme fatales of the 1940s to prepare for the role of Tracy, aiming for a performance blending vulnerability with calculating coldness, with the production physically demanding as surgery scenes used real medical equipment, and Kidman spent hours lying on a cold operating table to ensure the lighting and pallor of a surgical patient were perfect. The central plot revolves around a complex insurance fraud scheme, with the production hiring real medical consultants and insurance investigators to vet the loophole used in the film, researching the torsion surgery and specific legal requirements for a Massachusetts malpractice suit to ensure the $20 million settlement felt grounded in reality. The film grossed $46 million domestic against the $20 million budget, with the "I am God" line frequently cited by critics and fans as one of the most chilling monologues in thriller history, while establishing Baldwin as the premier intellectual heavy of the 90s.